Hi, I'm just sharing this link to Jimmy Dawes' interview here with Greg Palast, who is did work with the BBC at one stage, and he's correcting US media on Venezuela. Okay, so there's this comment here from somebody called Unapologetic, and I'm going to read it out because I think it's an excellent comment. The amount of propaganda and disinformation in the reporting on Venezuela is stunning. It is almost unanimously repeated that Maduro stole the last election and that there needs to be new elections held. Absolutely no investigation or evidence supporting that claim. In fact, the Jimmy Carter Institute that monitors elections said they have the most free, open democracy in the world. But everyone is fine telling a sovereign government that they need to redo their elections for no legitimate reason under threat of a coup based entirely on unsubstantiated claims and innuendo. They say Maduro is a brutal strongman dictator who silences the opposition. He has a very weird way of showing it by allowing Guaido to parade around the country, conducting anti-government protests, and also allowing him to openly coordinate with foreign actors to stage a coup, trying to bribe military officials, repeatedly threatening to violently overthrow the country's legitimate government and jail any generals who don't align with him. What are the actual verified facts that should be reported but haven't seen the light of day? US oil titans like the Kochs and Exxon, who brought the US government, have a direct interest in installing a new government in Venezuela that will let them raid Venezuela for the oil. Also unreported is that Guaido is acting entirely as a puppet of the US government. He was not elected president by the Venezuelan people. Venezuelans have largely sided with Maduro and shown support for him over Guaido. No government institution in Venezuela recognises him as the president, not even the military. The Supreme Court has ruled his actions are unconstitutional and illegitimate, and he might be prosecuted for his actions. They ordered him not to leave the country, and he did it anyway. But still, Maduro is the authoritarian thug who is acting outside the law. This was such a great interview. I've been covering the US coup in Venezuela on my channel in multiple videos. I plan on posting an update video sometime this week, so I'll check Unapologetics video channel, and everything that he's saying here is absolutely correct. And I need to here point out that the right-wing British government, the present Tory government, is, well, they've completely refused to hand over Venezuela's 1.5 billion in gold that's been held by the UK Exchequer. So we've got outright theft being committed by this present British government, which, as a British citizen myself, I'm not surprised because, you know, as a British citizen, I've been robbed time and time and time again. I've been robbed constantly, continually by this government, as have many British people. And in fact, according to the official figures, 120,000 British citizens have been robbed of their very lives directly through this same right-wing British government's economic policy, which is an act of terrorism against the British people. That is what it is. It's economic terrorism of the same kind that now they're hoping to benefit from by imposing and supporting these sanctions against Venezuela, for no other reason than Venezuela is a nation that has adopted the exact same policies as the people of Britain adopted after World War II. They provided social housing, welfare and healthcare and education for all the citizens, regardless of whether they have lots of money or not. In Britain, we are rapidly scrapping all of that and moving forward, full on, full swing, into a right-wing fascist state, because that's what this Tory government is, a right-wing fascist dictatorship that very likely got in through rigged elections, okay? We have serious evidence to question the results that apparently got Cameron in the first place, and certainly in the second place. So what we're dealing with is right-wing thugs who are presently controlling Britain. Now, I'm going to turn now to this recent video. John Bercow slams discourteous government, inexperienced ministers raise your game. And this has been uploaded by Productions EU. And here we have government postpones key no deal bill vote to avoid humiliating tax havens defeat. Now, I have shared in my videos, and I'll leave you the links again underneath, about how Brexit has got absolutely nothing at all to do with assuring sovereignty for British citizens. That is an absolute pack of lies. In fact, the opposite is true. British citizens will have even less sovereignty after Brexit, especially a no-deal Brexit. This Brexit deal was all about assuring sovereignty for the City of London to remain an independent state within Britain. That's the state that operates above and outside of the law as applies to the rest of the British people. They have their own police force, Westminster, okay, and they have full control of all the finance that's all run within that city, golden square mile in central London. And the truth is that Europe has been investigating these tax havens and was going to start announcing criminal activities. Their tax havens were under threat. Britain, as an EU nation, was going to have to come to heel, you see. And so suddenly we all get divided. There's all this stuff going on about immigrants and Muslims taking over the country, and how we're all going to be subject to Sharia law. And you know, today I've made a video, and I'll leave the link to it under this, so please don't listen to it if you can't bear strong language. But you know, that's looking at Grenfell, because I had the misfortune to be reminded of the whole horror show that is Grenfell, okay, this morning when I was asked to sign a petition. Sign a petition. You know, this is from allegedly highly developed, highly democratic country, Britain, you know, whose government apparently has a right to judge Venezuela as a dictatorship, okay. In our country, we have to sign a petition to ask the government to appoint a housing regulator to make sure that social housing is safe. And all directly on the fact that they've learnt the lesson. They've learnt the lesson. They've learnt the lesson of Grenfell. Because apparently that horror, that terror that was inflicted against the residents of Grenfell, all of that amounts to a lesson for London authorities, for Britain's councils. It was a lesson. It took how many people dying in fear and terror for them to learn their lesson? Really? Really? You know, and yes, I'm outraged. I'm outraged that I'm being asked to sign a petition, as if we should even need to sign a petition in a democratic country that such horror happened, that immediately there weren't swift changes brought about in every area immediately. But 2 years down the line, I'm asked to sign a petition for a housing regulator to make sure that social housing is safe. Because, you know, to request that the authorities learn a lesson. You know, and doubtless I'll be criticised and mocked and scorned because of expressing emotion. You know, how dare I express emotion? and use foul language in response to foul treatment and foul ignorance from people, professional people. Apparently that is why they're running our councils, isn't it? That is why they're responsible for our social housing, because apparently these people are all professionals. They're all educated, aren't they? That is why they're in positions of power and authority over the rest of British citizens, because they're professional people. They're educated. Oh, but apparently they're not educated enough. They need three. How many people? I mean, they're still saying 72 people lost their lives. We know that it was very likely amounts to the hundreds that lost their lives in that tower. But let's stick with the 72, and don't forget that includes children. Okay? That includes children. So let's stick to the official figure of 72. So it takes 72 people being trapped in their homes to die in fear and terror, okay, for them to learn a lesson. Because apparently the education that they've received, that apparently gives them entitlement to occupy such positions of power and authority in Britain, wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. And bearing in mind that those same professionals of the authorities that were controlling, presiding over Grenfell, they were repeatedly warned, repeatedly received complaints from the people of Grenfell's tower who had organised themselves into an action group, repeatedly warning the council about the fire dangers, because there'd been repeated power surges in that tower and people's electrical equipment was exploding. And the council blocked off one of only 2 exits in and out of the building. So there was only one exit in and out of the building, and that's why the firemen, when they arrived to put out the fire in a ground floor flat that had been started through a fridge exploding through a power surge, they had to tell people to stay in their flats because there was only one entrance into the building, and that was taken up with the firemen. And with people, all the people in the flats having to leave through the one exit would have severely impeded their efforts to put out the fire. Those firemen did not know that the council, knowingly, for the sake of saving a couple of £100,000, had decided to choose the non-fire retardant cladding for the building. They chose instead highly flammable cladding. So these professional people who knew that this building was suffering from repeated power surges that was causing electrical equipment to burst into flames, literally turn that building into a candle, and they did it knowingly. And that is what caused the rest of the fire, because the cladding on the outside caught fire and there was nothing that the firemen could do to put it out, because it spread under the cladding. And that's what ultimately killed people, the toxic fumes, you see. So we are talking about a general disregard for the people of Britain, the common people stock, okay? And the same for the people of Venezuela. The common people of Venezuela. And as Greg Palast and Jimmy Dore here rightly points out, is that what's going on in Venezuela are people who don't call themselves Venezuelans, that largely they call themselves Spaniards. And all of them are largely of European descent. And you can tell by the colour of their skin. And, you know, here they show the difference. These are the Guaido supporters, and these are the Maduro supporters. Okay, so, you know, this isn't, they're not using any, as he explains here, they're not using colour filters here. you can see a largely white opposition to a colour opposition. Except in Britain, we aren't just dealing with white supremacy. What we're dealing with is class supremacy. We're dealing with a class of people. It doesn't matter what colour they are. We're dealing with a class of people, largely who support the Tory government, fund them, get them into power, who then look after only those people's interests. They're the only people that the Tory government actually serve. Okay, to get them into power, the rest of us, the rest of the British public, white, brown, you name it, okay, we are stock and we are expendable. And you know, a few people, yeah, well, oh, wasn't it sad what happened in Grenfell? Let's learn from the lessons. Let's get a petition together, you know. And as I've said in my video, I'm sorry, no, these people need to be arrested and charged and prosecuted for criminal manslaughter, and actually a hate crime. Because only a council that absolutely hates its poorest residents could have subjected them to such risks in the first place, and continued, repeatedly ignored, and even harassed and intimidated the tenants of Grenfell who were complaining. And then apparently they're all going to learn their lesson. But no, sorry, let me just rephrase that. They aren't going to learn their lesson. They will only learn their lesson when we have persuaded them to by signing a petition. And this same government is denying the Venezuelan people their property of 1.5 billion in gold. They are supporting a self-proclaimed president as endorsed by Donald Trump and Mike Pence. And I tell you now, if they do that to Venezuela, believe you me, what they're doing to the British people is no different. It is no different. Because here, like I say, because that is essentially what is behind all this racism. It is a class consciousness. It's a class consciousness that is holding on to its own ancient, antiquated, Luciferian law rights of being free to do whatever they wish. And yes, if they want Venezuela's oil, yes, well, people can go back to living in shantytowns. And it's exactly the same in Britain. Except in Britain, people have it even worse, don't they? Because let's face it, you're not allowed to build a shantytown, are you? You're not allowed to make yourself a home out of cardboard and corrugated iron, are you? Because you'll be swept away. Because, you know, you need planning permission, don't you? We aren't allowed to build a shanty town in Britain, are we? There are some serious things going on in this country. And Brexit, I tell you now, these evil people, this evil dictatorship that is governing Britain right now and that has murdered British citizens. Yes, they have. Don't make no bones about it. They have murdered British citizens directly through economic terrorism. They have murdered people abroad in the Middle East, in Iraq and Libya and Syria and Afghanistan on the strength of a pack of lies. We very still lawfully suspect that Dr. David Kelly was murdered because he questioned their rhetoric about Iraq. And now they've foisted Brexit on us for no other reason than they want to protect the sovereignty of central London, that golden square mile of London City to remain a separate and independent state within Britain, with its rights to own tax havens abroad, so they can just siphon off the wealth of this country, drive the people into ever deeper levels of poverty, till at the end of the day, you know, a middle class family will be on the same level of living standards as people were in the 1980s on benefits. Yes, that is where it is going. And petitions are not going to get us anywhere. The only way now is to demand that this government steps down, because they have behaved criminally and unlawfully and are continuing to do so by voicing their support, again, all on the base of a pack of lies, against a democratically elected leader of another nation, withholding their gold, again, on grounds of a pack of lies. They have caused immense trouble and suffering to British citizens who've suffered as a direct result of this Brexit referendum that has unleashed this Trump type rhetoric of, oh, you know, we're no longer going to be politically correct, we're just going to say that we want to get back to British culture. Well, British culture was exactly what the Venezuelan people are trying to establish it in their country now. That was British culture. The culture men like my granddad gave their lives for, okay? That was the culture for a socio-capitalist society, a society where capitalists are not allowed just to rape the population and use them as wage slave labour, and discard them whenever they wish. So, yeah, go away, yeah, no social security for you, no healthcare, yeah, you go and watch your kids die because you can't afford a doctor, okay? You go and live in a cardboard box somewhere, and, you know, maybe I'll give you a job tomorrow for a few quid, you'll be able to feed your family for that day. No long-term security for you, no retirement rights, no pension rights, no rights to education for your children. In fact, there's going to be no hope for any of you ever to for your children ever to rise up out of that level of poverty, because the whole system is going to conspire to make sure to maintain this bulk of slave wage labour that is going to be there at our beck and call, and for us to use and throw away as we wish, just like the people of Grenfell could be thrown away. Yeah, let's just get rid of that. Yeah, let's just clad the whole building in flammable cladding. We won't bother to spend the extra, you know, couple of £100,000 on a multi-million project, okay? We won't bother spending extra £100,000 on buying the flame retardant cladding for a building that we knew was prone to power surges and fires. And we'll block one of the two exits in and out of the building. You know, as I say, I'm sorry, Britain, look, I don't care if you voted Brexit, okay, you made a mistake if you thought that you were voting for sovereignty. You're not voting for sovereignty. You voted for sovereignty for London City Square Mile. That is it. Okay? That is it. And for their rights to carry on having their tax havens. And that is why there won't be a deal for Brexit, because they refuse. They refuse to have any legislation in place that is going to threaten their tax havens, their rights to siphon money out of Britain and leave the people of Britain destitute. That is what it is all about. And as I say, I'll leave you the link to my other video. I'll leave you another link to Videos Williamson. And people need to wake up to reality, because the fairy tales are over. Okay, you can talk to me about immigrants and Muslims till you're blue in the face, but I'm sorry, immigrants and Muslims have not murdered 120,000 British people. That is your own government. And that is why there is going to be no deal, because they absolutely refuse to bow down to the EU stance on these tax havens. Okay? So what is the point? What is the point of having a Brexit with a deal? Actually, there is no point, because we actually lose more than we gain. And what is the point of having Brexit in the first place, when that means we're then going to be beholden to America for all our food? And, oh, in exchange for letting their private health insurance corporations take over running of our NHS. So we've just seen what is happening to the people of Venezuela, haven't we? Because they've elected a socio-capitalist government. You know, a capitalist government, but that includes socialism, like the people of post-World War II Britain implemented. Right? Because we're not talking Soviet communism here, are we? So they've issued sanctions against them. Oh, so what's going to happen to Britain then when we elect, say, Jeremy Corbyn, who to me is still far, far on the side of wishy-washy, okay? But suppose America decides to issue sanctions against Britain. What are we going to do? What are you going to do? We don't produce enough food to feed our nation. How are you going to live? At least Venezuela does produce enough food to feed its people. Its people aren't literally starving. Alright, they can't get certain products, certain foods, but they do produce enough food, and they have enough neighbouring nations that do support them, that will give them food. What's Britain going to do? What is Britain going to do? We're an island. Oh, we're separated from the EU. Is the EU going to feed us? You need to think very carefully, because you know this person, this America, we think is our friend. Look at it. It's a fucking monster. There's no two other ways to describe it. It is a fucking monster. It fucks life. And it is fucking the American people in exactly the same way as the British people are being fucked by this government now, and the Blairite government before it. And they're fucking about with our planet, they and the corporations that they serve. And it is up to us, you know, that's why I've expressed such rage. I can't even tell you. It's debilitating, actually, to have to live with that level of insanity shoved in my face, and being asked, you know, being shown a huge gaping wound and being asked to sign a petition to put a sticky plaster over it. Honestly, I literally can't get my breath.